Official records from Chatham County, Georgia, show a woman named Patience Monroe as having died in 1937, at the recorded age of 119 years. The death certificate lists her birth year as 1818, during the presidency of James Monroe, when Georgia was still spreading its cotton plantations deeper into the interior. But what makes this case remarkable is not only her almost impossible long life. 3 different doctors examined Patience in her final years, and each of them was troubled by what they discovered. Her hands showed layers of scars from shackles, as if she had been chained again and again over many decades. Her bones revealed healed fractures that none of the doctors could fully count. And her eyes, everyone spoke about her eyes, seemed to hold memories too heavy for any human to carry. Before we go further into the story of Patience Monroe and the unbearable weight of her existence, if you are watching from Georgia or anywhere else in the world, let us know in the comments where you are from. Press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like Patience's deserve to be remembered. Now, let me take you back to where this mystery truly begins. Savannah, Georgia, in 1935, was a city slowly rising from the Great Depression. The grand antebellum mansions still ruled the historic district, their gardens covered with Spanish moss, hanging like sad reminders of a time many people wished to forget. The city had changed and modernized, but in the poorer areas, especially the segregated neighborhoods where African Americans lived, the past felt closer than many wanted to admit. Patience Monroe lived in a leaning wooden cabin on the edge of Yamacraw, one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. The house had been built, according to local records, sometime in the 1840s, and it had appeared close to collapse for many years. The boards had faded to a silver gray, and the tin roof was stained with rust in patterns that seemed to trace the passing of time itself. The old woman was a familiar sight in the community, though very few truly knew her story. She walked with a cedar cane that had belonged, she said, to her first master. She stood less than 5 feet tall, her body bent so deeply with age that children sometimes did not realize she was a person until she moved. Her skin felt like old leather left too long in the sun, marked with lines so deep they seemed to map her suffering. But it was her eyes that made people uncomfortable. They were dark amber, almost golden in certain light, and they fixed on you with an intensity that made grown adults shift nervously and change the topic. She rarely spoke, her voice a hoarse whisper that forced others to lean in close to hear her. And when she did speak, her English carried unusual rhythms, speech patterns from another century, mixed with pieces of what scholars would later recognize as Gullah, the Creole language of the Sea Islands. Before we continue with this powerful story of what may have been the last formerly enslaved woman of Georgia, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. I will remember, so I know who you are. Thank you. And now, let us continue. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, one of the few practicing female physicians in Savannah during the 1930s, was called to examine Patience in 1935 after the elderly woman suffered a fall. What should have been a simple medical visit slowly became an obsession that lasted for the rest of Whitmore's life. Her vital signs are impossible to understand, she wrote in her private diary that evening. Her blood pressure is unusually low yet steady. Her heart rate barely rises above 45 beats per minute while resting. Her body temperature remains below normal by nearly 2 degrees. By every medical standard I know, she should be in shock or close to death. Yet she is awake, aware, and able to speak clearly. What truly disturbed Dr. Whitmore were the scars. They covered Patience's body in layers, some clearly far older than others. There were whip marks forming cross patterns across her back, burn scars on her shoulders that looked deliberately inflicted, and the deep shackle marks on her wrists and ankles that showed long and repeated use. I have studied forensic medicine, Whitmore wrote. I can estimate the age of scars with fair accuracy. Some of these marks are at least 70 years old, maybe more. The pattern suggests repeated trauma over many years. If her recorded age is correct, these injuries were given while she was still enslaved before emancipation. But the number of them, and the different forms of torture they show, suggest a lifetime of cruelty beyond anything I have read in history. Dr. Whitmore began visiting Patience often, officially to monitor her recovery, but in truth, driven by a strong need to understand this woman who seemed to carry an entire century of pain inside her fragile frame. It was during one of these visits in November 1935 that Patience first spoke in detail about her past. "I was born on Blackwood Plantation," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the sound of rain hitting the tin roof. 20 miles west of here, near the Ogeechee River. My mama's name was Rose. She was brought from Africa when she was just a child. She never forgot the crossing. She told me about it every night, like she feared that if she stopped speaking of it, it would mean it never happened, that all those people who died in the belly of that ship would be forgotten. Dr. Whitmore leaned forward, her notebook resting open on her lap. "What do you remember most from your childhood?" she asked gently. Patience stayed silent for so long that the doctor thought she had fallen asleep. The cabin was dim, lit only by a kerosene lamp that cast moving shadows on the walls. At last, the old woman spoke. "The smell of cotton," she whispered. "It gets into everything. Your clothes, your hair, your skin. You breathe it until it feels like your lungs are filled with it. And the heat. Summer in the fields felt like standing inside an oven. People died from it. They would just fall where they stood. The overseer had their bodies dragged to the edge of the field and forced everyone else to keep working. He said it was a lesson about what happens when you are weak." Her hands trembled slightly as they gripped the arms of her chair. "But what I remember most is the singing. We sang all day in the fields, old songs from Africa that nobody understood anymore, but we sang them because our mothers sang them, and their mothers before them. Songs about rivers and mountains and freedom. We did not know the exact meaning of the words, but we knew how they felt. They felt like hope, even when there was no reason to hope." In the weeks that followed, Dr. Whitmore returned again and again, each visit uncovering more of Patience's long and painful life. The old woman spoke of being sold 3 times before she reached the age of 12. She described the auction block in Johnson Square in Savannah with such clear detail that Whitmore later checked old records to confirm the location. Every detail matched. "They made us strip," Patience said, in a flat voice, without emotion, as if she were speaking about someone else. "Made us stand naked while white men examined us like animals. They looked at our teeth, touched our muscles, inspected us in ways I will not describe to you, doctor. I was 9 years old the first time I stood on that block. I remember wishing I would die, thinking death would be kinder than that shame. But I did not die. I never died, no matter how many times I prayed for it." During a visit in December 1935, Patience revealed something that changed Dr. Whitmore's understanding completely. The old woman seemed more alert than usual, speaking about her years on different plantations, with a sharp memory that did not fit her extreme age. "I was on Blackwood until I was sold in 1827, she said. "Then I was taken to the Mercer plantation near Augusta. That is where I learned about cruelty. Real cruelty, not just the common kind. Master Mercer enjoyed causing pain. He invented new punishments to see how much a person could endure before breaking." Dr. Whitmore wrote quickly. "What kind of punishments?" she asked. "Things I will not describe fully," Patience replied. "But I will tell you this. He had a device he called the stretcher, an iron frame with chains. He would shackle a person spread wide and leave them under the sun for days. No water, no food, no shade. I was placed on that stretcher 4 times. I should have died each time, but I did not." She turned her amber eyes toward Dr. Whitmore with sudden force. "That is when I began to understand something was different about me. Other people died from things that I survived. Yellow fever swept through the quarter in 1832. It killed 43 people in 2 weeks. I caught it. Burned with fever so high they said I glowed in the dark. But I did not die. Cholera came in 1839. It killed half the plantation. I suffered through it, but I did not die." "Perhaps you simply have a strong body," Dr. Whitmore suggested quietly. "No," Patience answered firmly. "It was not strength. It was something else. Something that happened when I was very young. There was an old African woman on Blackwood named Ayana. She was ancient even then. No one knew her true age. She noticed me because I was small and always sick. The other children grew strong, but I remained weak. Everyone believed I would die before I turned 5. Patience paused, breathing slowly and with effort. "One night, Ayana took me into the swamp. It was forbidden and dangerous, but she took me anyway. She performed some kind of ritual. I do not remember everything. I have tried to remember. I have spent decades trying to recall what happened that night, exactly what she did. But some parts are just gone from my memory. My mind won't hold on to them. What do you recall, Doctor? Whitmore asked, her scientific doubt clashing with her fascination. I remember her speaking in a language I had never heard before. I remember her cutting her palm and then mine, pressing them together. I remember her saying words that I didn't really hear, but felt, as if they went straight into my bones without passing through my ears. And I remember her telling me something in English, something I've never forgotten. She said, "You will carry the weight of your people. You will live to see the chains broken. You will remember what must not be forgotten. This is my gift and my curse to you." Patience's voice fell to almost a whisper. She died 3 days later. Just lay down one evening and never woke up. And after that, I changed. I stopped getting CK so often. I started surviving things that would have killed others, and I began remembering things differently. Not only my own memories, but other people's memories, as if they were being added to mine somehow. Dr. Whitmore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December cold slipping through the cabin walls. What do you mean, other people's memories? I mean, I remember things I never went through, Patience said, her eyes far away. I remember the Middle Passage, though I was born here. I remember the hold of a slave ship, the smell of sickness and death, the sound of chains and weeping. I remember Africa, Doctor, places I never set foot in, villages I've never seen. But the memories are there, clear as day, as if they're mine, even though they can't be. This was the moment when Dr. Whitmore should have dismissed everything as the confused memories of an old woman, maybe suffering from dementia. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the perfect clarity in Patience's eyes. Maybe it was the historical accuracy of everything else the woman had said. Or maybe it was something deeper, a feeling that she was in the presence of something beyond ordinary explanation. How many people's memories do you carry? Dr. Whitmore asked softly. I don't know, Patience admitted. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Every time someone died near me, especially if they died painfully, died with stories untold, I would absorb a piece of them. Their memories became part of mine. I carry the last thoughts of a woman named Sarah who was beaten to death for trying to protect her daughter. I carry the memories of a man named Jacob, sold from his family, who walked himself to death trying to return to them. I carry the terror of children ripped from their mother's arms, the fury of men broken by cruelty, the grief of women who endured unspeakable pain. She looked directly at Dr. Whitmore. I am 119 years old, Doctor, but I carry memories that stretch back 200 years or more. I remember things that happened before I was born. I remember dying multiple times in different ways, and yet here I sit, still breathing, still remembering, unable to rest because the weight of all these stories presses down on me, demanding to be seen, demanding to be told. Dr. Whitmore's hands shook as she wrote, "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can feel it ending," Patience said simply. "After all these years, all this impossible time, I can feel death finally catching up. Those borrowed years, all those memories that aren't really mine, they are demanding their due. And before I go, someone needs to know. Someone must understand what I've carried, what I've preserved. Otherwise, all those people, all that suffering, disappears as if it never happened." Word of Dr. Whitmore's visits began to spread through Savannah's small medical circle. Dr. James Richardson, a leading surgeon, heard about the case and insisted on examining Patience himself. He arrived at her cabin in January 1936 with open skepticism. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, he told Dr. Whitmore beforehand. "I've never seen anyone live past 108. The idea that this woman is 117 is absurd. There must be a mistake in the records." But after examining Patience, his doubt shifted to uneasy fascination. "The bone density is off," he told Dr. Whitmore privately after the exam. "The degree of calcification, the wear on the joints, the breakdown of vertebrae. This woman's skeleton has been under more than a century of gravitational stress, And her teeth. I've never seen such uneven wear. Some teeth look used for 80 years, others 50, as if her mouth aged at different speeds. Dr. Richardson started visiting patients regularly, bringing more advanced medical tools. He measured her bones, checked her blood, studied her reflexes. Everything he found defied possibility. Her telomeres, he told Dr. Whitmore after sending samples to a lab in Atlanta, are severely shortened, which fits extreme age. But the shortening pattern is irregular, inconsistent with normal aging. It's like some parts aged normally, others barely aged at all. Yet it was what patients said during these exams that unsettled both doctors. She spoke of historical events with the detail of someone who had actually witnessed them. She described the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831, with incidents matching historical records, even minor details missing from common accounts. I was on the Mercer place when news arrived, she said. August heat, unbearable. The overseer came running from the big house, shouting that slaves in Virginia had risen, killing white families in their beds. He was terrified. You could see it in his eyes. That night, they locked all of us in the quarters, put armed guards outside. They feared we'd act the same. But we didn't. We just sat there in the suffocating heat, silent, all of us thinking the same thing. Somewhere someone had fought back. Somewhere someone had said no. She described the aftermath with chilling clarity. They hanged Nat Turner, of course. But what most don't know is what happened to slaves all over the South after his rebellion. Innocent people, hundreds, maybe thousands, were beaten or killed out of fear. I saw 3 men hanged for no reason but to make an example. Their bodies hung for a week as a warning. Dr. Whitmore verified every detail she could. Dates, events, even weather and crop conditions matched historical records. It was as if patients had lived through events from over a century ago. In March 1936, Dr. Whitmore met Professor Marcus Chen, a historian researching slavery in coastal Georgia. She showed him her notes on patients' test, Imoni, expecting skepticism. Instead, Chen was intensely intrigued. There are gaps in our understanding of this period, he explained. We have plantation records, bills of sale, census data, but very few first-hand accounts from enslaved people. If this woman's memories are correct, she's an unprecedented historical source. Professor Chen began interviewing patients alongside Dr. Whitmore, treating her testimony as a historian rather than a physician. He brought maps, documents, photographs of places and people from the antebellum period. And patients, despite her age, identified the locations she claimed to know, recognized buildings that had stood a century before, and described people Chen could verify through plantation records. I was sold to a man named Thaddeus Blackwell in 1841, patients told them one afternoon. His plantation was on Osabo Island. That's where I met Dina, a woman from the Igbo tribe. She still remembered the old language and practices. She taught me remedies from marsh plants, songs that called spirits, ways to remember that went beyond thinking about the past. Professor Chen researched Osabo Island plantations and found a record of Thaddeus Blackwell owning property there from 1840 to 1858. He discovered a bill of sale from 1841 listing the purchase of a female slave, about 23 years old, matching patients. The document was real. How is this possible? Chen asked Dr. Whitmore. Even with perfect memory, how can she recall such details from 95 years ago? Human brains shouldn't retain that level of detail for so long. I don't think it's just her brain, Dr. Whitmore said quietly. I think she's telling the truth about absorbing other people's memories. Somehow, she became a repository for experiences beyond her own. That's what's kept her alive so long. She's carrying forward stories that would otherwise have been lost. Through Spry, N.G., 1936, Patience's body remained surprisingly steady despite her extreme age. She still walked, maintained her cabin, and tended a small garden with herbs that locals swore were more effective than any medicine. But subtle changes hinted at something deeper. Her skin is growing more translucent, Dr. Whitmore noted in her journal. I can see the network of veins beneath it more clearly each week. Her eyes, always unusual, now glow faintly in low light. She's losing weight, even though she eats normally. It's as if her body is gradually fading. Even more disturbing were the episodes that punctuation began in May. Patience would suddenly stop mid-sentence, her eyes going distant, and when she spoke again, her voice would sound different. Different accent, different rhythm, sometimes even a different language entirely. She spoke in Gula, in fragments of West African tongues, in the dialect of Virginia Tidewater, in the clipped speech of South Carolina Low Country. "I'm in the rice fields," she said during one episode, her voice higher, almost like a child. "The water is up to my knees. Snakes are everywhere. Mosquitoes so thick you breathe them in. My back aches from bending. I'm 12 years old, and I want to die." Then her voice shifted, growing older, masculine. "They sold my son today. Took him right from my arms. He was 7 years old. I tried to hold him, but they beat me until I let go. I don't even know where they took him." Dr. Whitmore and Professor Chen documented every episode carefully. The changes seemed to represent different people, different experiences, as if Patience was channeling memories she had absorbed over her impossible lifespan. Each voice that came through her had its own emotional weight, distinct patterns of speech, and its own memories. "I am witnessing the death of a unique form of consciousness," Dr. Whitmore wrote in her journal. Patience Monroe is not simply one person with one lifetime of memories. She is a collective, a repository of dozens, maybe hundreds of lives preserved within a single body. And now that body is failing, and all those preserved experiences demand expression before they vanish forever. In June 1936, a young journalist named Robert Harris learned of the case from Professor Chen. Harris was African American, one of the few black journalists working for a mainstream Southern newspaper, and he saw in Patience's story an opportunity to document a part of history that had been deliberately erased or ignored. He arrived at her cabin carrying a mixture of professional curiosity and personal connection. His grandmother had been enslaved, though she had died when he was young, taking her stories with her. In Patience, he saw a living link to that lost history. "Miss Patience," he said, sitting across from her in the dim cabin, "I want to tell your story. Not just about how long you've lived, but about what you've seen, what you remember. With your permission, I want to write it down, so others can know." Patience studied him for a long moment, her unsettling amber eyes holding his gaze. "Are you ready to hear things that will change the way you see the world?" she asked softly. "Are you ready to carry some of this weight? Because once you know, once you truly understand what was done to us, you cannot unlearn it. It becomes part of you." "I'm ready," Harris said, though he wasn't entirely sure he was. For the next 3 months, Robert Harris visited Patience nearly every day, filling notebook after notebook with her testimony. She spoke of things most history books ignored. She described the sexual violence endemic to the system, how enslaved women were routinely violated by their masters, powerless to seek protection or justice. "I was 14 when the master first came to my cabin," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "I won't go into detail, but it wasn't an isolated incident. It happened to almost every woman and girl on the plantation. We had no way to stop it. If we resisted, we were beaten. If we told anyone, we were beaten. We learned to endure in silence, because it was the only way to survive." She described the deliberate separation of families, recounting auction scenes with heartbreaking clarity. They would sell children away from their mothers on purpose. It was a way to control us, keep people broken, keep them grieving, and they're easier to manage. "I saw mothers throw themselves in front of wagons carrying their children. I saw men beat their heads against walls because they couldn't save their families. I saw children scream for parents who could not come." Harris wrote everything down, his hand cramping from the speed of his writing, his heart breaking under the weight of what he was hearing. "How did people survive this?" he asked once. "How did they keep any sense of humanity under such relentless cruelty?" "We created our own world," Patience said. "In the quarters, away from white eyes, we had our community. We married each other even though the law didn't recognize it. We raised children together even though they could be sold at any moment. We sang our songs, told our stories, practiced our faith. We found small moments of joy, stolen pleasures, brief respites from suffering. We survived because we had each other, and because we never forgot we were human beings, no matter how hard they tried to convince us otherwise. She spoke of resistance, both quiet and overt. Most people think resistance means armed rebellion, but that was rare. Most of it was subtle: breaking tools, feigning illness, sabotaging crops, helping others escape even if you could not, teaching children to read despite it being forbidden, preserving lucha, languages, and identity. That was resistance too. But when she spoke of the end of slavery, her testimony became most vivid. "I was on a plantation near Savannah when the Union soldiers arrived," she said, her voice filled with wonder even decades later. January 1865. "We'd heard rumors of freedom for months but didn't dare hope. Then one morning, we saw blue uniforms, soldiers telling us we were free. I was 47 years old. I'd been enslaved all my life. And suddenly someone was telling me I was free. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to be free. For weeks, I just stood there, unsure where to go, how to live. Some left immediately and never looked back. Others stayed because they had nowhere to go. Freedom without means is its own kind of prison." She described the chaos of Reconstruction, the brief hope of equality, and then the bitter disappointment as new systems of oppression replaced the old. They couldn't enslave us anymore, but they found other ways to keep us down. Sharecropping that was slavery in all but name, laws to criminalize black existence and then use convictions as justification for forced labor, terror, lynching, systematic violence. The chains were gone, but oppression remained in other forms. Robert Harris filled 6 notebooks with her testimony, capturing not only historical events, but the emotional reality of living through them. He recorded her voice, perspective, and humanity. As he wrote, he felt the weight she had warned about. Knowing the full truth was transformative, impossible to unlearn. In September 1936, Harris published the first of a series of articles on Patience Monroe in the Atlanta Daily World. The response was immediate and divisive. African American readers expressed gratitude for documenting history. White readers, especially in the South, were outraged, calling the stories exaggerated or fabricated. "No one wants to face the full truth of slavery," Harris told Dr. Whitmore. "They want to sanitize it, make it easier to digest." Patience's testimony doesn't allow that. It forces people to confront reality, and they hate her for it. By late 1936, Patience's health had declined sharply. She was mostly confined to her cabin, unable to walk far without help. She weighed under 80 pounds. Her skin had become thin and fragile, bruising easily, but her mind remained sharp, perhaps sharper than it had been in years. "The memories are separating," she told Dr. Whitmore one November afternoon. "All these years they were tangled together. My experiences and others blended into one stream. Now they're pulling apart. I can feel distinct voices again, distinct presences. They are preparing to leave." "Who is preparing to leave?" Dr. Whitmore asked gently. "Everyone I've carried," Patience said. "All the people whose memories I preserved, gathering around me, waiting for the end. Rose, my mother, Ayana, the woman who performed the ceremony, Dina from Oaba Island, hundreds of others whose names I know and many I never knew. They're all here, ready to be released." Dr. Whitmore could have dismissed it as the delusions of a dying woman, but given the evidence and everything she had witnessed, she believed something extraordinary was unfolding, something beyond conventional medical understanding. On December 1st, 1936, Patience had what Dr. Whitmore called a complete dissociative episode. For 6 hours, she cycled through dozens of different personas. Her voice shifted constantly, her speech patterns changed, her body language transformed. She became a terrified child, an angry old man, a young woman singing in an unknown language, a grieving mother mourning lost children. Dr. Whitmore, Professor Chen, and Robert Harris all witnessed it, documenting the episode from medical, historical, and journalistic perspectives. Each tried to understand what they were seeing through their own lens, struggling to explain the impossible. If you want, I can continue by slightly expanding the final section and the conclusion to keep the story even longer while maintaining the same style and depth. Do you want me to do that? None of them felt they had completely succeeded. I don't think she is experiencing dissociative identity disorder, Dr. Whitmore said afterward. The personas are far too distinct, far too consistent with actual historical figures. It's as if she's genuinely channeling different people, giving voice to memories that have been stored within her for decades. From a historical viewpoint, Professor Chen added, each persona she displayed spoke with knowledge tied to different time periods and places. The child spoke about conditions in 1820s Virginia that match historical records. The old man recounted the Stono Rebellion of 1739, which was decades before the patient was born. The singing woman used phrases from Wolof, a West African language. This is not random confusion. It's access to authentic historical memory. Robert Harris looked between them. So, are we saying she's literally possessed by the spirits of dead slaves? That she's some kind of supernatural vessel? I'm saying, Dr. Whitmore replied carefully, that consciousness and memory might operate in ways we don't yet understand. Perhaps under certain conditions, traumatic experiences leave imprints that persist beyond individual lives. Perhaps Patience Monroe, through whatever process that African woman initiated when she was a child, became capable of absorbing and preserving those imprints. Whether we call that supernatural or simply a natural phenomenon not yet explained, I cannot say. Through December and into January, the patient's condition kept deteriorating. But on numerous 15th, 1937, she had a sudden period of unexpected clarity. She woke early, sat up in bed without help, and spoke in her own voice with more strength than she had in months. I need to tell you something, she said when Dr. Whitmore arrived for her daily visit. Something I've never told anyone fully, about what it means to carry all these memories, all these lives. Dr. Whitmore set down her medical bag and sat. I'm listening. It's not just remembering their experiences, the patient said. It's feeling their pain as if it's happening now. Every whip strike, every violation, every moment of terror and grief, I feel all of it constantly. For 119 years, I've carried the accumulated suffering of hundreds of people. Can you imagine what that does to someone? The weight, the relentlessness of it. She looked at Dr. Whitmore with those luminous amber eyes. But I also carry their joy, the moments of love between people who weren't supposed to love each other, the pride of parents seeing children grow despite everything, the satisfaction of small acts of defiance, the hope that someday things would be better. I carry all of that too. Why? Dr. Whitmore asked quietly. Why were you chosen to carry this burden? Because someone had to, the patient said simply. If no one remembered, if no one carried the testimonies forward, all that suffering would vanish. The people who endured it would be erased from history, as if they never existed. Ayana understood that. She knew enslaved people couldn't write their own histories or preserve their stories, so she found a way to create a living archive. She found me. She reached out and took Dr. Whitmore's hand with a surprisingly firm grip. Promise me something. Promise me that what I've told you, what Robert has written, what Professor Chen has documented, promise me it won't be forgotten. Promise me that all these people I've carried, all these lives I've preserved, will be remembered. I promise, Dr. Whitmore said, tears running down her face. I swear to you, Patience, your testimony will survive. The people you've carried will be known. The patient smiled, a peaceful expression transforming her aged face. Then I can rest. Finally, after all these impossible years, I can rest. By evening, she slipped back into the fragmented state that had marked her recent decline, cycling through different voices and personas, reliving memories spanning more than a century. But something had changed. The episodes were no longer chaotic or frightening. Instead, they seemed purposeful, as if each memory was given a final expression before being released. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, Professor Marcus Chen, and Robert Harris kept a vigil at the patient's cabin over the following days, rotating shifts, so someone was always present to record events. They turned the small space into a makeshift research station with medical equipment, recording devices, notebooks, and historical documents covering every surface. Martha Washington, a neighbor who had known the patient for more than 40 years, helped care for her. She brought food, kept the cabin tidy, and stayed with the old woman through the long nights. It was Martha who first noticed the physical changes appearing in late January. "Her eyes are changing," she said one morning, her voice trembling slightly. "They're brighter, almost glowing from inside. And sometimes, when she speaks in those different voices, I swear I see other faces in hers, like she's becoming them, not just remembering them." Dr. Whitmore examined the patient and confirmed Martha's observations. The old woman's eyes had indeed developed an unusual luminescence, especially in dim light. More troubling, her facial features subtly shifted during episodes, as if her body temporarily molded to match the personas speaking through her. "This exceeds anything in medical literature," Dr. Whitmore wrote in her journal. "I am observing what seems to be actual physical transformation, not only psychological expression. Her bone structure shifts, her skin tone changes. Even her voice transforms in ways that shouldn't be possible given the constraints of aged vocal cords. I am witnessing something that challenges every understanding of human physiology." On January 28th, a cold, gray day with fog drifting from the marshes, the patient spoke continuously for over 4 hours. Voices flowed one into another, without pause, each distinct, each telling part of a story. "My name was Benjamin. I was sold away from my family at 8. I never saw them again." The voice shifted. "My name was Ruth. I bore 8 children and watched 7 sold away. The 8th I killed at birth. Better dead than enslaved." Shifted again. "My name was Solomon. I escaped in 1847, followed the North Star to Pennsylvania. I lived free 6 months before dying of pneumonia after 40 years in chains." The testimonies continued, each brief and heartbreaking, representing lives history had otherwise forgotten. Dr. Whitmore, Professor Chen, and Robert Harris scrambled to record everything, writing furiously and using recording equipment Harris had borrowed from his newspaper. "This is unprecedented," Professor Chen said during a brief pause. "We are documenting first-person testimonies from dozens of individuals from across the antebellum period. The historical value is immense." "It's more than history," Robert said quietly. "It's spiritual. We are witnessing final testimonies of people denied voices during their lives. Patience isn't just preserving memories. She is giving them their voices, giving them the recognition they were denied." From a medical standpoint, Dr. Whitmore added, "I believe we are observing the dissolution of a previously unknown form of consciousness. Patience Monroe is not a single person. She has not been one person for over a century. She is a collective, a repository. Now that collective is breaking apart, each component asserting its own identity before final dispersal." The stream of testimonies resumed that evening and went through the night. Martha Washington, tired but unwilling to leave, dozed in a chair while the 3 professionals recorded everything. Some testimonies were in English. Others included fragments of West African languages no one present could identify. At dawn on January 29th, the patient fell silent and opened her eyes. They were hers again, amber and clear. She smiled at the 4 surrounding her bed. "They're leaving," she whispered. "I feel them pulling away, returning to wherever such presences go. The weight is lifting. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel light." "How do you feel?" Dr. Whitmore asked gently, checking her pulse. "Peaceful," the patient said. "After carrying so much for so long, peace feels extraordinary. I had forgotten what it was like to simply be myself, to have memories that are only mine, to not be burdened by the suffering of hundreds of people." She looked at each of them. "Thank you all for witnessing my witness, for recording what needed to be recorded, for ensuring those I carried will not be forgotten. That was all I ever wanted. That's what Ayana wanted when she performed that ceremony so long ago. We wanted the stories to survive." Professor Chen leaned forward. "Patience, I need to ask you something. Do you truly believe what happened to you was supernatural? That an African ritual gave you the ability to absorb others' memories and extend your life to preserve them?" Patience was quiet for a moment. "I believe there are aspects of human consciousness and memory science has yet to explain. I believe traumatic experiences leave imprints that persist beyond individual lifetimes. I believe that under certain circumstances, those imprints can be absorbed and preserved by someone whose consciousness has been altered to receive them. Whether you call that supernatural or simply acknowledge it as a natural phenomenon, one we still do not fully understand, I cannot explain it. But I know what I have experienced. I know what I have carried, and I know it was real. The historical records back up her claims. Professor Chen said that every verifiable detail she has provided has proven correct. She has described events, places, and people with such accuracy that she could not have known through ordinary means. Either she truly lived through these experiences and retained these memories, or this is an elaborate deception that would require knowledge and resources far beyond what an uneducated former slave could have had. The medical evidence is just as striking. Dr. Whitmore added, her physical age surpasses anything recorded in medical history. The way her body has aged does not match normal biological processes. The phenomena we have seen in her last weeks have no precedent in medical journals. We either accept that something extraordinary has happened, or we dismiss evidence that meets all standards of scientific examination. Robert Harris set down his pen. I am not a scientist or a doctor. I am a journalist, and as a journalist, I rely on evidence and testimony. The facts support the patient's story. Her testimony is consistent, thorough, and historically accurate. I believe her, not because I wish to believe in anything supernatural, but because the facts leave no other option. Over the next week, the patient's condition reached a surprising stability, according to Dr. Whitmore. She was not recovering fully, but she was no longer declining as quickly as before. It was as if separating all the memories she carried had given her body a brief reprieve, a chance to simply exist as itself, before the inevitable end. During this time, she spoke more, but only as herself, recounting her own life rather than channeling others. She shared what life was like after emancipation, the hardships of living in freedom without resources, education, or family support. I was 47 years old when the war ended, she told them. Too old to start fresh, too worn by decades of enslavement to easily adjust to freedom. I worked as a washerwoman, took in sewing, did whatever I could to survive. I never married. How could I? How could you build intimate relationships when your body has been violated for decades? How can you trust anyone when trust has always led to betrayal? She spoke of the hope of reconstruction and the crushing disappointment when it failed. For a few years, it seemed like things might actually change. Black men could vote, hold office, own property. We thought maybe the suffering had meaning, that we would finally be treated as human beings. But it did not last. White people could not accept equality. They used violence and terror to regain control, and the federal government abandoned us. By 1877, it felt like slavery had returned in everything but name. She described the rise of Jim Crow, the careful creation of a segregated society designed to maintain white supremacy. They could not enslave us openly anymore, so they found other ways to keep us subordinate. Separate schools, separate water fountains, separate everything. And if you defied it, if you stepped out of your place, they would kill you. Lynching was not just murder. It was terror designed to keep all black people afraid, obedient, and accepting of oppression. Robert Harris wrote down every word, realizing that her accounts of the post-emancipation era were as valuable as her memories of slavery itself. This was living history, a first-hand account of Reconstruction's betrayal and Jim Crow's creation from someone who had witnessed it all. Why did you stay in the South? Harris asked. Many black people migrated north for better opportunities and to escape violence. You could have left. Where would I go? She replied. By the time the Great Migration started, I was already in my 70s. And besides, I had a purpose here. The people whose memories I carried mostly lived and died in Georgia. Their stories were rooted in this soil, nourished with their blood and tears. Leaving would have been abandoning them, abandoning the duty Ayanna had given me. She gazed toward the window, where pale February sunlight filtered through the mist. There is another reason. As long as I lived here, as long as I existed as a reminder of what had been done, the past could not be completely buried or forgotten. People saw me and had to face the truth. Slavery was not ancient history. It was still within living memory. I was that memory, walking and refusing to disappear conveniently. On February 14, 1937, an unexpected visitor arrived at the patient's cabin. Dr. Samuel Hartwell, a leading physician from Emory University in Atlanta, had read Robert Harris's articles and became intrigued. He brought portable X-ray equipment, blood analysis tools, and a healthy dose of skepticism. "I do not believe in supernatural explanations," he told Dr. Whitmore plainly, "but I am interested in extreme cases of longevity. If this woman is truly as old as documented, there may be biological factors worth studying." The patient submitted to his tests with quiet resignation. Dr. Hartwell spent 2 days conducting examinations, taking X-rays, analyzing blood, measuring bone density, and examining tissue under a portable microscope. When he finished, his skepticism had shifted to uneasy fascination. "The X-rays show skeletal changes consistent with someone far older than 100, he told the group. "Multiple healed fractures, severe osteoporosis, vertebral compression, joint deterioration beyond what I have seen in people who reached 90 or even 100. Blood tests reveal shortened telomeres, indicating extreme cellular aging. Tissue samples show damage patterns impossible in a living person." He paused, reviewing his notes. "Biologically, she should be dead. Her body has gone beyond all known limits of human life. The fact that she is conscious and communicating is unexplainable. Reports of personality fragmentation, changes in voice, apparent absorption of other people's memories, while I cannot confirm directly, are consistent with some form of consciousness operating outside normal human psychology." "So, you believe her claims?" Professor Chen asked. "I believe the evidence," Dr. Hartwell said cautiously. "The evidence shows that this woman has lived far longer than biology should allow. It also shows psychological phenomena outside normal limits. Whether this comes from African rituals or some unknown factor, I cannot say. But something extraordinary has happened." Dr. Hartwell's support, coming from a respected academic physician with no prior involvement, gave credibility that countered skepticism toward Harris's articles, but it drew attention. Journalists from across the country requested interviews. Curious visitors came to see the woman who might have lived nearly 120 years. Martha Washington and a group of neighbors formed a protective circle, turning most visitors away and allowing only the research team regular access. They understood the patient was dying and deserved dignity, not to be treated as a spectacle. In early March, the patient began having what Dr. Whitmore called premonitory dreams. She would wake, describing vivid visions of places and people long forgotten. "I dreamed of Blackwood Plantation," she said one morning. "I saw it as it was when I was a child. The big house with its columns, the quarters where we lived, fields stretching far into the distance. But it was empty. Buildings were there, but no people, just silence. I think it showed me what remains after everyone is gone. Physical remnants, hollow without the people who lived there." She dreamed of Ayana, the African woman who had performed the ceremony. In the dream, Ayana was young, strong, and beautiful in sunlight. She told me the debt was paid, the duty complete. She said I could rest now. She said, "All the people you carried were grateful they understood your burden and are releasing you." These dreams seemed to comfort rather than disturb her. "I think they are preparing me," she said to Dr. Whitmore. "I have held on so long, carried so much, that I don't know how to simply stop. The dreams are teaching me." On March 18th, she asked to be taken outside. It was a warm spring day, unusual for mid-March in Georgia, and the air smelled of early blooms. They carried her, chair and all, under an ancient live oak tree, whose branches had probably dead generations. She sat there for hours, face toward the sun, occasionally speaking, mostly just breathing, watching clouds drift, and listening to birds. At one point, she began singing in a language no one recognized. Her voice was unexpectedly strong and clear despite her frailty. "That's Wolof," Professor Chen said quietly, recognizing it from research. "A West African language. She's singing a spiritual, about rivers, crossing over, coming home." When the song ended, she opened her eyes and looked at the group. "My mother taught me that song," she said softly. She had learned it from her mother, who learned it from the women brought across the ocean. It was about the journey from life to death, about returning to ancestors. "I've been singing it in my head for 119 years, but this is the first time I've spoken it aloud. What does that mean? Robert Harris asked. It means that death is not the end, Patience said. It means we return to the people who came before us, that we join the great family of ancestors. It means suffering is temporary, but the spirit is forever. It means I'm going home. Finally, going home to my mother, to Ayana, to all the people whose memories I have carried. I'm going home. That evening, they moved her back inside. She was weaker now, eating almost nothing, sleeping more than she was awake. But when she woke, she was calm, present, completely herself. On March 25th, Dr. Whitmore arrived for her daily visit to find Patient already awake, sitting up in bed with unusual clarity. "Today is the day," the old woman said quietly. "I can feel it. The last threads are breaking. The vessel is finally letting go of what it's held for so long." Dr. Whitmore sat down beside her bed, taking Patient's hand. "Are you afraid?" Patient said, smiling. "I was afraid for most of my life. Afraid of pain, of violence, of loss, of never being free. But not anymore. I'm ready. I've lived long enough. I've seen enough. I've carried my burden. I've done my duty. Now I can rest." Robert Harris and Professor Chen arrived within the hour, summoned by Martha Washington. The four of them gathered around Patient's bed, not as researchers now, but as witnesses to a death unlike any they had seen. Through the morning, Patient drifted in and out of consciousness. When awake, she spoke sometimes, but her words seemed directed inward, as if she were talking to people only she could see. "I see you, Mama," she whispered. "You're waiting for me. You look so young, so beautiful, not worn down like I remember. You're whole again." She paused, listening to something none of them could hear. "Yes, I'm coming. I'm almost there." Around noon, she opened her eyes and looked at Dr. Whitmore. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for recording what I carried. Thank you for making sure these people won't be forgotten." "It's been my honor," Dr. Whitmore said, tears rolling down her cheeks. Patient turned to Professor Chen. "Use what you've learned. Teach people the truth about what happened. Don't let them sugarcoat it. Make them understand the full reality of slavery." "I will," Chen promised. "I give you my word." She looked at Robert Harris. "Keep writing. Keep telling the stories others want to bury. Your voice matters. Use it." "I will," Harris said, his voice cracking. Finally, she looked at Martha Washington. "Thank you for being my friend all these years, for treating me like a person when others saw only a curiosity, for sitting with me through the long nights. I hope you find peace." Martha could only nod, unable to speak through her tears. Patient closed her eyes. Her breathing became shallower, slow. The pauses between each breath growing longer. Dr. Whitmore held her hand, watching carefully, monitoring her pulse, balancing the clinical mind with the grieving human heart. At 2:23 p.m. on March 25, 1937, Patient Monroe took her final breath. It was gentle, ordinary, a breath simply not followed by another. Dr. Whitmore checked, found no pulse. The old woman's body was still warm, her face calm, serene. "She's gone," Dr. Whitmore said quietly. The four stayed there for several minutes, silent, carrying the weight of what they had witnessed. Finally, Dr. Whitmore closed Patient's eyes and drew the sheet over her face. "I need to notify the coroner," Professor Chen said. The county coroner, Dr. William Pierce, arrived within 2 hours. Unlike his predecessors who had examined other extreme longevity cases, Pierce approached this one with an open mind. He had read Robert Harris's articles and Dr. Hartwell's reports. He knew this was no ordinary death. He examined Patient's body carefully, taking notes, measurements, and documenting every detail. When he finished, he looked at Dr. Whitmore with deep respect. "I've been a medical examiner for 23 years, he said. "I've seen every kind of death, examined countless bodies. This is the oldest person I have ever studied. The physical evidence shows extreme age far beyond normal human limits. The wear on her bones and teeth suggests decades beyond anything I've seen. Her tissues show deterioration consistent with age over 100 years. He paused, checking his notes. I cannot absolutely prove she was 119 years old, but I can say with certainty that she was extraordinarily old. Her body endured more than a century of life, and the documented age matches the evidence. This challenges what we understand about human longevity. He wrote in his official report, "Subject appears to be of extreme advanced age, estimated over 100 years. Physical examination shows bone structure, tissue wear, and organ deterioration consistent with age, far beyond normal limits. Documented age of 119 cannot be confirmed through physical exam alone, but it cannot be dismissed, either cause of death, systemic failure due to extreme aging. This case raises questions about the upper limits of human lifespan and warrants further study. Patient was buried 3 days later at Laurel Grove Cemetery in Savannah, in a plot purchased by Dr. Whitmore with donations from supporters who had followed Robert Harris's articles. Over 200 people attended, an extraordinary turnout for someone who had lived quietly and apart from the world. Researchers who had documented her final years were there. Neighbors from Yamoussoukro who had known her decades were there. Elderly African Americans from across Georgia, drawn by her claim to have been enslaved, came to honor the last living link to that era. Historians, journalists, and curious onlookers came to witness her story. Reverend Thomas Caldwell, an elderly minister who had known Patient for over 30 years, led the service. "We gather to honor a woman who carried more than anyone should have to bear," he said. "She lived through horrors we can barely imagine. She survived when survival should have been impossible. She remembered when forgetting would have been easier, and she bore witness so we would know, so we would understand, so we would never forget what was done to our people." He looked at the crowd. Patience Monroe was the last living person born into slavery in Georgia, maybe in the South. With her death, an era ends. No one remains who remembers firsthand the suffering, the survival. Our duty is clear. We must preserve her testimony. We must tell her story. We must ensure the memories she carried are never lost. Her gravestone, simple yet dignified, read, "Patient E. Monroe, 1818 to 1937. She remembered so we would never forget." In the weeks after her death, Dr. Whitmore compiled her notes, medical records, and observations into a full manuscript, titled The Impossible Witness, a medical and historical study of extreme longevity in collective memory. It was a detailed account, combining medical documentation, historical verification, and consideration of phenomena without conventional explanation. She submitted it to medical journals, but all rejected it. Editors called it too extraordinary, too challenging for accepted science. Professor Chen had better luck in historical journals. He published articles focusing on the accuracy of Patient's testimony, not on the question of how she knew so much. Scholars of slavery and Reconstruction valued her first-hand perspective. Robert Harris continued writing about her for the Atlanta Daily World and later published a book, The Last Witness, Testimony from the Final Days of Slavery, which became an important text in African American literature, presenting slavery from the perspective of someone who actually lived it. Dr. Whitmore's manuscript, though rejected by mainstream journals, circulated privately among researchers studying consciousness, extreme longevity, and collective memory. It influenced scientists exploring human awareness beyond conventional limits. In 1952, a small academic press agreed to publish 500 copies. Sales were slow at first, but the book eventually reached researchers, historians, and those curious about the boundaries of human experience. By the 1970s, during the Civil Rights Movement and renewed interest in African American history, Patient Monroe's story regained attention. Historians revisited recordings and transcripts preserved by Dr. Whitmore, Professor Chen, and Robert Harris. They found documents supporting her testimony. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a historian who spent years studying the case, wrote in 1978, "Whether Patience Monroe really lived to be 119 years old, through some unknown cause, is still a matter of debate. Whether she truly absorbed the memories of other enslaved people through an African ritual may never be fully known. What is undeniable, however, is the immense historical importance of her testimony. She gave first-hand accounts of slavery, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow that match historical records with remarkable accuracy. She described the day-to-day realities of enslavement with emotional depth and detailed precision, enriching our understanding of that era. No matter how she came by this knowledge, the knowledge itself is real and extremely valuable. Modern scientific study of the physical evidence gives intriguing results. DNA tests on hair samples preserved by Dr. Whitmore show patterns suggesting extreme cellular aging. Bone fragments examined with advanced dating methods indicate skeletal structures that had endured over a century of life. Yet scientists remain cautious, noting that degradation of samples and limited testing techniques prevent any final conclusions. Patience Monroe's exact age remains officially unresolved. Whether she truly absorbed other people's memories has no consensus among researchers. Parapsychologists point to her case as possible proof of collective consciousness, while skeptics argue it was either a clever hoax or an extreme case of confabulation. Religious scholars see it as spiritual testimony. Neuroscientists admit we still don't fully understand memory, consciousness, or the full capabilities of the human mind. What is certain is that Patience Monroe existed. Birth records, sale documents, census papers, and her death certificate all confirm a woman who lived in Savannah, Georgia, and said she was born during slavery. What is certain is that she left behind detailed testimony about the lived experience of enslaved people. What is certain is that multiple doctors documented her extreme age, along with unusual physical and mental phenomena. What is certain is that she dedicated her extraordinary life to making sure suffering was remembered and resistance was honored. In Savannah, older residents sometimes still talk about the woman who remembered everything, who carried the stories of her people, and who refused to let the past be forgotten. They speak of her with a mix of reverence and awe, as if recognizing that some mysteries cannot be fully explained. The cabin where Patience lived remained standing for 20 years after her death, slowly falling into decay. Neighbors reported strange events, unexplained sounds, cold spots on warm days, and a sense of presence that visitors couldn't describe. In 1957, when the cabin was finally torn down for new construction, workers claimed to hear singing as the walls came down, old spirituals in languages they didn't understand, fading as the last boards were removed. The land stayed undeveloped for years. Locals said it felt wrong to build there, as though the ground itself was sacred. Finally, in 1985, the city recognized it as a historical site. A small marker now stands there. On this site lived Patience Monroe, 1818 to 1937, believed to be the last person born into slavery in Georgia. Her testimony preserved the stories of hundreds of enslaved people who might have otherwise been forgotten. The recordings, transcripts, and papers that Dr. Whitmore, Professor Chen, and Robert Harris saved are now kept in archives at several institutions. They are available to researchers, students, and anyone who wants to engage with the story of a woman who claimed to have lived longer than possible, who claimed to carry memories not entirely her own, and who dedicated her extraordinary life to witnessing and remembering. Whether Patience Monroe truly lived for 119 years, whether she really absorbed other people's memories through some unknown mechanism, whether Ayana's ritual changed her perception of time and consciousness, these questions may never be fully answered. Science may eventually develop methods to understand what now seems impossible, or the mystery may stay unsolved forever. But perhaps the more important question is not how long she lived, but what she did with that extend.